Salutations, this is Khuma'zi Tayuun, aka Demented Kitsune, aka Crazed Kitsune, aka whatever. And welcome to my 4th instructional video, Dark Knight for Dummies. In this video, we will be going over the stats, accessories, and so forth for the Dark Knight job, which is the 3rd and final job introduced in Heaven's Ward. They are a tanking class. So, their purpose is to hold the enemy's attention, take the damage for your party, and generally just make sure that things aren't eating your friends alive. So that's very helpful. Without further ado, let's get into this. Let's start with their stats. Now, tanks, such as Dark Knight, will be using Vitality. It is their primary stat. Not only does it affect how much damage they will be dealing, it also affects how much health they have. So you want to be putting as much as you can into Vitality, because you want as much health as you can get, and you want to be able to do a decent amount of damage, just because that helps you hold an enemy's aggression. Strength does also affect the damage you do, but it doesn't give you health. So never go for Strength over Vitality. You want as much Vitality as you can get. Dexterity does nothing. Intelligence influences magic damage, and you don't actually deal magic damage. Well, you may deal magic damage with some of your attacks, but I believe they're still based off of your main attack and not off of intelligence. Mind affects healing magic potency. You have no healing magic whatsoever. Piety gives you more MP, which, when this job first came out, people thought you might have to put points into Piety, because this tank is very centered around its MP. Its MP is used for quite a few things. Now, as Vitality is your primary stat, you are obviously going to want Vitality accessories. And then various skills such as accuracy, determination, and skill speed tend to come with them. Accuracy is useful because you don't want to miss. Every time you miss, that's a bit of hate you just didn't produce. Not fun. Determination just has a bit of an effect on how much damage you do overall, so it's a useful stat. And with that covered, let's move on to the actions and traits and such. Again, since this is a Heaven's Ward exclusive job, it is a pure job, so it has no base class, no class actions, but it does get cross classes from a couple of other classes. I'll be going over those when we get there. So, much like with Astrologian and Machinist, unless you are level synced down, you're going to have everything at this part of the screen here, because you're going to be level 30 and above, but you could be going into duties that sync you down to level 18, or level 1 in the Palace of the Dead. So you will lose access to some of these until you are in higher level duties or level up in the Palace of the Dead. At level 8, Dark Knight has Enhanced Vitality, which gives them more Vitality, so more health and damage. Useful. At level 14, they get Enhanced Stone Skin, which increases the damage reduction buff of Shadow Skin to 20%. It starts at 10. At level 16, they get Enhanced Vitality 2, for more Vitality, more health and damage. Woohoo! At level 20, you get Clean Weapon, which shortens the recast of your Blood Weapon skill to 40 seconds. We'll be dealing with Blood Weapon when we get there. At level 24, you get Enhanced Vitality 3, 6 more Vitality, more damage, more health. Sweet. At level 28, Hasty Reprisal. This shortens the recast of Reprisal to 30 seconds instead of 60. We'll, of course, be dealing with Reprisal when we get there. At level 32, you get Enhanced Scourge, which increases its duration to 30 seconds. At level 36, Low Blows. It grants a 30% chance that each and every time you get a parry, Low Blows recast will reset, so you can use it again. This can be quite helpful. At level 40, you get Enhanced Unmend, which grants a 30% chance that after casting Unmend, your next Unleash will cost no MP, and the status that makes this happen will last for 15 seconds. At level 44, you get Enhanced Dark Dance, which increases its parry rate to 30%. Originally, I believe it was 15 or 20%. And at level 48, you get Soul Devourer, which increases the Soul Eater Absorb HP effect to 100% of the damage it does instead of 50%. With the traits covered, let's move on to the skills. At level 1, Dark Knight has Hard Slash, which is a potency 150 attack. It's on global cooldown. It costs 60 TP. As with all TP-based classes, the cost of the skill never changes. At least, not by leveling. There are some classes that can affect how much TP their skills cost. It is an instant cast because you're not a mage. You just have to wait 2.5 seconds, or less if you have a lot of skill speed, before you can use another global cooldown skill. At level 2, you get your first off global cooldown, which requires 90 seconds before it can be used again. It is Shadow Skin. It lasts for 20 seconds, and for those 20 seconds, it will reduce the damage you take by 10% if you are below level 14. If you are above it, then you will have a 20% damage reduction. So the skill is very useful in the sense that it helps you not die while you're tanking enemies so that they're not attacking your party. At level 4, you get Spinning Slash, another 60 TP global cooldown skill. It's got a potency of 100. Doesn't sound impressive. It has an additional effect of an increased enmity, so it point for point makes more aggro on an enemy you hit with it, as aggro is generated based on how much damage is done or healing is done. Damage is generally on a 1-to-1 ratio, and healing is generally, I believe, on a 0.5-to-1 ratio for damage. Some healing skills actually have a higher aggro ratio. Most of them are 0.5-to-1, I think. Skills like Spinning Slash are on a 2-to-1 or higher. I'm not entirely sure of the ratio, but I do know that they produce more enmity per point than basically every other skill. However, Spinning Slash has a combo action of Hard Slash, meaning if you use Hard Slash, then you can use Spinning Slash and have it be a potency 220. It still has its additional effect, but it's doing more damage, so it's making more hate. This is something that you will see in all tanks and melee DPS combos. Skills which, if you chain them together, are more powerful and sometimes receive additional effects. For tanks, one of the most important combos you have is your hate combo. With your hate combo, you will be dealing more damage with each of your skills and producing a lot of enmity to keep the enemy's attention focused on you. Definitely do this at least a couple of times during a fight. I tend to do it more than anything else because I just focus on keeping the aggro of the enemies continuously so that my party can just focus on dealing damage. I'm not an optimal Dark Knight, but I at least do my job, which is holding enemy attention so that my party can kill it. On to the next skill. Level 6, you gain Scourge. It costs 60 TP, it's on your global cooldown, it delivers a potency 100 attack, and applies a 40 potency damage over time that lasts for, I believe, 18 seconds if you do not have the Enhanced Scourge trait, 30 seconds if you do. This is a useful skill to use in general. It's not the end of the world if you forget to keep it applied to whatever enemy you're attacking, in particular if you're just on regular trash mobs. On bosses, it can definitely help out. Try to remember to use it, but don't beat yourself up if you forget. Your main function should be keeping hate. At level 8, you get Unleash, which, as you see, uses MP, so its cost does go up as you increase in level, though your MP will increase at a larger ratio, so you can still use it more often. At level 60, it uses 795 MP. It is on global cooldown and delivers a potency 100 attack to everything within 5 yalms of you. It has increased enmity, and in PvP it has Bind, which will last for 6 seconds. This skill is exceedingly useful during fights where you have multiple enemies and need to hold their aggro all the time, because every time the healer heals you, anything that has aggro on you is gaining aggro on them. So you're going to be using Unleash at least a couple of times during some fights. And as I mentioned, MP is important. We'll get into why before long. At level 10, you get Low Blow, a 25-second recast stun. It has potency 100 impact, and has a stun duration of 5 seconds, 3 in PvP. This you will be using to interrupt dangerous attacks you don't want happening, or if the enemy can't be stunned, or they just don't have dangerous attacks, you can use it for extra damage. Especially once you have the Low Blows trait, because every time you get a parry, you could potentially use it again. So you could be using quite a few Low Blows to deal a fair amount of increased damage, so it's very nice. At level 12, you get Siphon Strike, another 60 TP global cooldown skill. Potency 100 normally, but it combos off of Hard Slash and has a combo potency of 250. It does not have increased enmity, so don't try using this just to tank with. You will not hold aggro if you never use your aggro combo. But it also has a combo bonus where it will restore some of your MP. MP being important, this is a useful skill. At level 15, you get Unmend. It is a global cooldown. At level 60, it costs 353 MP. It is your ranged pull. You use this on the first enemy that you want killed during a fight, if possible, to grab their attention, and then you will run in and you will use Unleash on all the other enemies to get their focus on you enough that a healer won't potentially suddenly take them off of you. You'll probably use Unleash another once or twice during most fights, just to make sure the enemy continues to focus on you and not the healer, or anyone who's doing AoEs. It deals 150 unexpected damage, it has increased enmity, and when you have the enhanced Unmend, it has the 30% chance to make your next Unleash cost no MP. This buff will last for 15 seconds or until you use Unleash. So it's actually quite useful, as it gives you a fairly decent shot at just not having to spend over 1000 MP grabbing the aggro of a group. At level 18, you get Blood Weapon, which is a 60-second cooldown normally, 40 seconds after you have the Clean Weapon trait. This will reduce the weapon skill cast and recast times, spell cast and recast times, so you don't actually have spells, and your auto attack delay by 10%, and will convert physical damage dealt into MP while reducing the cost of your TP skills by 20% for the next 15 seconds. And below that, you will see something very important. Cannot be used while under the effect of Grit. This is important. We'll get into why very shortly. But Blood Weapon is useful in only some situations. At level 22, you get Reprisal. It starts as a 60-second cooldown, but becomes a 30-second cooldown. Unlike most cooldowns, you can't just use this when you want. It's a potency 220 attack that you can only use right after you get a parry. You have a few seconds after you get a parry to use this before it becomes unavailable again. It also applies a damage down of 10% to the enemy you hit it with, which will last for 20 seconds. It's possible to keep this debuff going indefinitely if you get lots of parries. Well, not quite indefinitely, because it will fall off before you can use Reprisal again, but it's possible to keep this thing on an enemy almost constantly if you get parries enough, which is sort of a crapshoot. At level 26, you get Power Slash, another 60 TP global cooldown attack, potency 100 normally, but it's the end of your hate combo. It has increased enmity just as a base effect. Its combo action is Spinning Slash, so you would use Hard Slash, Spinning Slash, then Power Slash to deliver an ending attack of 300 potency. You can use a skill called Dark Arts, which you will get later, to add even more enmity to it, but you don't need that. You actually don't. If you're needing this, you're probably not doing enough to hold hate to begin with. Or you're trying to go for optimal, and so you're trying to get an enormous amount of enmity really quickly, so you can then focus on dealing damage. At level 30, you get Dark Side. It costs 442 MP to activate. It has a 5-second recast, so you can't just immediately turn it back off. And this is one of the skills that is most important to Dark Knight. If you are level 30 and above, you should be in Dark Side, and you should try to never let Dark Side fall off. While Dark Side is active, it will constantly drain your MP. If you're not in battle, your natural MP regeneration is greater than the drain of Dark Side. In battle, it is not. But the reason you want it on is it increases the damage you deal by 15%. Unfortunately, it also makes you immune to MP refresh effects, so bards, machinists, astrologians, none of them can regenerate your MP. You have to maintain it yourself, which is why you have Siphon Strike, and Blood Weapon if you aren't using your tanking stance, which is the skill you get from your first job quest. Grit. It costs 1326 MP at level 60. You turn it on, and you can just leave it on if you're tanking. To be an optimal tank, you would turn it on, establish your aggro on all the enemies, then turn it off so you're dealing 15% more damage with Dark Side, because Grit makes you take 20% less damage while also making you deal 20% less damage. But it also increases your enmity generation, so everything you do is just making more hate, making it easier for you to keep the enemy focused on you, and it increases your accuracy, your chance to hit by 5%. This skill is on the global cooldown, and me, as a tank, I just leave it on. Yes, I'm dealing 5% less damage than I would be if I didn't have Dark Side or Grit up, and 20% less damage than if I didn't have Grit on at all. But I'm still dealing enough damage to do what I need to do, which is hold enemy aggro. This is the job of the tank. If you can tank without Grit, or you feel comfortable doing so without Grit, go ahead. I just prefer to have the absolute certainty that nobody's ever pulling anything off of me unless I'm screwing up. So I leave Grit on, because the amount of hate I generate with Grit on is absolutely insane. At level 34, you get Dark Dance, a 30-second cooldown which increases your parry rate by 15 to 20% at first, 30% when you have the enhanced Dark Dance trait, I believe. You can only use Dark Dance if you are already under the effect of Dark Side. Dark Side stays on as long as you don't turn it back off or run out of MP. This increased parry chances basically just to give you a better shot at using Reprisal, taking less damage, because when you parry an attack you take less damage, and possibly trigger the low blows trait when you have that. It lasts for 20 seconds. If you use Dark Arts before you use Dark Dance, then it will also increase your evasion by 20%, giving you a 20% better chance of just not getting hit at all, which can be useful. I'm sure there are times when it's especially useful. But since its main function is parry to increase the possibilities of reprisal and repeated low blows, I personally don't use Dark Arts on it, and honestly, when you're tanking, there aren't many situations where you need to use Dark Arts. At level 35, your next job quest will give you Blood Price, a 40-second cooldown, which for the next 15 seconds will give you back MP every time you suffer damage. This is exceedingly useful, and in every fight you should be using this as often as you can, because the less you have to worry about running out of MP, the better, because you don't want to lose Dark Side. At level 38, you get Soul Eater, a 50 TP global cooldown weapon skill, potency 100 normally, but if you've used Siphon Strike before that, you get the combo potency of 260. If you don't combo it and you use Dark Arts, it's a potency 240. But if you do combo into it and use Dark Arts, it's a potency 400. When you're under Grit, it absorbs 100% of the damage it deals as HP to you with the Soul Devourer trait, 50% if you don't have it yet. This skill can help you stay up, and if you're doing your MP combo on Dark Knight, it's not a bad skill to end with. There's a skill that is actually potentially more useful, but if it's a matter of survival, Soul Eater. If it's a matter of damage, the other skill, which we'll get to when we get to it. At level 40, your next job quest will give you Dark Passenger. This costs 884 MP at level 60. It's a 30-second cooldown. It delivers a potency 150 attack to everything in a line in front of you. You can only use it if you have Dark Side up. If you use Dark Arts, it's potency 250 and has a 15-second blind, reducing the chance of the enemies hitting you. This skill can be useful, but the amount of MP you have to invest into it can be not worth it, and you don't particularly need this if you're tanking. It's actually more useful if you are in an 8-man party and you are the off tank, because unless you are tanking without Grit up, in which case you can use Blood Weapon to offset the MP investment. But if you're main tanking and using Grit, then Dark Passenger can actually result in you losing your Dark Side, which will just make you do less damage, which will make it harder for you to hold aggro. But if you can use it without running out of MP, don't be afraid to. Just be careful with your MP. At level 42, you acquire the Dark Mind ability, which is a 60-second cooldown, which will, for 10 seconds, reduce the magic damage you will take by 15%. It can only be used when you are under Dark Side. If you use Dark Arts before you use Dark Mind, then it will reduce the magic damage you take by 30%. There are situations where this is actually very useful, such as magic damage tank buster attacks that you know are coming. At level 45, your next job quest will give you Dark Arts. It has a 3-second recast, and it costs, at level 60, 1768 MP. This skill is not cheap, as you can see down there. I have just a little under 7,000 MP. This skill takes a huge chunk of your MP to use. But if you use it, certain skills will gain additional effects, as we've covered along the way, such as Dark Mind getting its magic resistance doubled. Dark Arts can be useful, and using it at the right times is one of the main challenges of being a Dark Knight. When you are actively tanking enemies, you don't need to use Dark Arts that often, because most of the skills that are influenced by it it mainly makes them deal more damage, which is more useful if you are off tanking or you just don't have Grit turned on. Still, it can be useful, especially if you are not in Grit, because it's easier to deal with the MP consumption when you have skills like Blood Weapon active. At level 46, you get Shadow Wall, a 180-second cooldown which reduces the damage you take by 30% for 10 seconds. This is another very useful skill for staying alive. You will generally save this for when your other defensive cooldowns are on cooldown, or an especially big attack is coming and you really want it to hurt you less. It is also your most potent defensive cooldown. At level 50, you acquire the Delirium skill, a 50 TP global cooldown weapon skill. It's got a potency of 100 normally, but it has a combo action with Siphon Strike, just like Soul Eater. Its combo potency is 280, so it's stronger than Soul Eater. It also will apply a debuff to the enemy which reduces their intelligence by 10% and has a 20-second duration. Note that it says effect does not stack with Dragon Kick. This is a skill that belongs to one of the melee DPS, Monk. Don't worry, Monk's Dragon Kick overrides Delirium completely. You cannot knock Dragon Kick off with Delirium. So if you're going for a DPS combo to do damage, go ahead. You don't have to be afraid of Delirium ruining the Monk's thing. It won't. Your job quest at level 50 will give you Living Dead, a 300-second cooldown. That's a long cooldown. That's 5 minutes. And there's a good reason for that. When you activate this, for the next 10 seconds, if an attack would otherwise kill you outside of certain attacks which are just going to kill you, you will instead be locked at 1 HP and enter the Walking Dead status, which will last for another 10 seconds. If your healers do not restore HP to you equaling 100% of your maximum health, they don't actually have to get you back to full, they just have to have healed you for a total value of 100% of your maximum health. If they don't manage that within 10 seconds, you will die. You will just fall over. It doesn't matter if they were 1 HP off. If they haven't healed your maximum HP worth of health in 10 seconds, you're dead. For me, with my gear, that is 26,920 HP they will need to heal. White Mage and Scholar have no trouble doing this. White Mage even has their own 5-minute cooldown that specifically does that. So, if you've got a White Mage and you need to pop Living Dead, no worries. They've got Benediction to watch your back. Astrologians have to push a little bit to achieve it, but they can. It's just sort of hard. And on to the post-50 skills, which are all acquired from job quests, as you stop learning new skills at level 50 through just leveling. 52, you get the 45-second cooldown Salted Earth. This allows you to place an area of effect on the ground that is 5 yalms in radius, so a 10 yalm wide circle. This area will, over the next 21 seconds, deal a 75 potency attack every 3 seconds to any enemy inside of this area. This skill is just useful. Main tank, off tank, solo, party, doesn't matter. Feel free to throw this down on enemies you're fighting because it costs you nothing and gives you more damage. At level 54, you get Plunge, a 30-second recast, 200 potency leap. You will jump the 15 yalm range it has to the enemy you use it on and hit them for a potency 200 attack. This is very useful for tanking because you can throw your ranged pull Unmend, which has a 15 yalm radius, plunge in, use Unleash, and then take your position, because this is something that we'll be covering fairly shortly. Positioning as a tank. This is an important thing. At level 56, you acquire Abyssal Drain. At level 60, it costs 972 MP. This is a ranged version of Unleash that has more potency. It's potency 120 as opposed to 100, and it has increased enmity. And if you use Darkside, all the damage it does will also be returned to you as HP. If you're doing big pulls where lots of enemies are piling on you, you're probably going to be in Grit to take less damage. You're going to turn on Blood Price so that everything that's hitting you is giving you back MP, and then just to solidify some aggro, or maybe just not die, pop Dark Arts and Abyssal Drain. But it's not absolutely necessary to use, but it can be useful, as you could use Abyssal Drain to grab the enemy's attention, plunge in, and the one you plunge on is your main target. Everything else you just hit with Abyssal Drain to make them hate you more. At level 58, you get Soul Survivor, a 120-second cooldown, which will apply the status Another Victim to the enemy you use it on. If they die within the next 15 seconds, then you get 20% of your maximum HP and MP restored. So if an enemy's about to die, slap this on them and laugh. In PvP, it also increases the damage your target takes by 10% for 15 seconds. And finally, we have Carve and Spit. This is the last Dark Knight skill. It is a 60-second cooldown, potency 100 attack. It says it's a threefold attack, it only has one impact. It will just deal a single hit of 100 potency, but it also restores your MP. It restores 884, if I'm remembering correctly, so it's rather useful. If you use Dark Arts, however, it will not restore any MP, but will be a potency 450 attack. So it can be a very big surge of damage, especially if you are not in Grit. And now for the additional skills. These are acquired from Gladiator and Marauder. I have 3 skills from Marauder and 2 from Gladiator. The 2 I have from Gladiator are Convalescence, which is acquired at level 10 and is in my level 10 cross-class slot because it's a very useful 120-second cooldown. It increases the amount of HP restored from healing magic by 20% for 20 seconds. So you definitely want that. Awareness is another cooldown that you may, in some situations, want, as it makes you immune to critical hits, but it's not that useful overall. And as you can see, I don't have it cross-classed. 1 second. Sorry about that. Throat issues. The other cross-class I take from Gladiator is Provoke. You can see it in my level 30 slot, which is the 3rd, because before that point you probably won't need it. In fact, you hopefully won't need it much at all. But if somebody somehow manages to take the aggression of a single enemy off of you, this 40-second cooldown allows you to instantly place yourself at the top of that enemy's hate list, but it's just barely. You have to immediately follow this with something else, preferably an enmity-generating skill, like Unmend. This is used to reclaim the aggro of enemies. This is not used for pulling, even though it's got 10 more yalms of range than Unmend, and it is not used just to get more hate on a boss. It doesn't actually generate any aggro at all. The other skills are Savage Blade, which is part of a Gladiator / Paladin's hate combo, but there's no reason for you to cross-class this. Flash costs less than Unmend, I believe. Yes, it costs less than Unmend. It has the same radius, and it has an increase. It produces hate on enemies, but it's less effective than Unleash by a very large margin. So don't bother. For Marauder, the 3 skills I have are Foresight, which is acquired at level 2 on Marauder, so very, very easy to get. And I put that in my 2nd slot, level 20. It's a 120-second cooldown that for 20 seconds increases your defense by 20%. So it's useful because it makes you just less damage. Their level 4 skill is Skull Sunder, part of their hate combo. Again, no reason. Fracture is their damage over time. Its TP cost and potency is not worth it for almost anyone, really. I've even heard that warriors don't use this skill because of the DPS down on them to spend the global cooldown on it. For monks it is useful, but monks are special. At level 8, you get the Bloodbath cooldown, a 90-second cooldown that converts 25% of all physical damage you deal into HP for you for 15 seconds. This helps you survive. This and Foresight are the two most important cooldowns you can get off of Marauder, which is why you see them in my level 20 and 40 slots. And the last skill you can get is Mercy Stroke at level 26. I stopped leveling Marauder at level 26 because I don't especially enjoy playing the Marauder/Warrior style, because they are more of a DPS who has enmity generation. They have the HP to tank, and they have the defenses, but they're more designed for dealing damage instead of taking it. And that just doesn't sit well with me. But Mercy Stroke is a very useful cooldown, and I would recommend leveling Marauder to 26 minimum in order to acquire this, because it's a 90-second cooldown, 200 potency execute. When the enemy is below 20% of their maximum health, you can use this attack. If it ends up as the killing blow, meaning the enemy dies directly as a result of being struck with Mercy Stroke, you get 20% of your maximum health restored. So that's useful. That's very useful. Also just useful for being a 200 potency off global cooldown attack you can use when the enemy gets really low. And with skills gone over, it's time to demonstrate and explain a few things about Dark Knight. First, let's get some explanations out of the way. As a tank, your job is to hold aggro. That part is obvious. What might be less obvious is that you should also be positioning the enemies so that they are facing away from your party, as some enemies will just have cleave attacks or other attacks that hit things in front of them that aren't just you. So you don't want them facing your party. It also makes it easier for your melee DPS to get their positionals, which are from the rear and the flank, because you're making the enemy show their backside to them. So that's helpful. Additionally, one thing that many tanks will say you don't need to do, but I find very useful because it just cuts out the confusion when you're dealing with groups of enemies. Because unless it's going to all be AoE'd down, marking the priority to kill, basically the order in which these enemies should die, helps your DPS know what they're doing. So, it's not the end of the world if you don't mark. Don't feel bad if you don't mark. But if you do, lots of people will appreciate it. I appreciate it when I DPSing and a tank marks, because it tells me this is the thing that I need to kill first, and then this is the thing that needs to die next. It just makes my job easier. It also makes the tank's job easier because it ensures that DPS are focusing on the right thing. Unless they're idiots. I have had DPS do something rather annoying. I will have marked, say, there are 4 enemies total in the poll. There's no reason to have all 4 of them marked, as the one that's unmarked is obviously the last, right? Apparently some DPS think this is the first. So while I'm busy tanking this enemy and using AoE hate to hold aggression on everything, there's a DPS who's focusing this thing down, meaning they're outstripping my area aggro generation, so the enemy just decides, okay, I'm going to kill the DPS now. I will usually, on the first time they do this, grab it back off of them, but if they're consistently doing this, that enemy's just theirs now. I don't care. I marked these things. I'm telling you the order they're supposed to die in. If you're ignoring me, that's your problem now. You should not be going out of your way to compensate for bad party play. If your party members are not cooperating with you as a tank, then they are going to suffer the consequences. It's going to get to the point where you can't stop it anyway, so don't even bother. You're the tank. You're the one leading the party. You're the one setting the pace. You don't decide what pace can be set. That's decided by the healer and what they can handle. You don't big pull if your healer cannot keep you alive through it, or they're just not confident they can. Do not stress the crap out of your healer. They may be unable to deal with it and leave, and replacing a healer isn't easy. It's also not easy to replace a tank, but tanks don't usually leave unless they're complete jerks. I have, to date, not left a single duty when I was tanking. There is one duty I can't tank, but that's because of personal emotional conflict. I'm claustrophobic. But that's enough about marking. Marking is useful, you should do it, but it's not the end of the world if you don't. Now, if you are level 30 or above, you should have both of these skills active. Especially Grit, because it causes you to produce more enmity, which makes it easier for you to hold the enemy's aggro. At the start of a duty, you're generally going to be turning these both on. And then you have a second or two before you reach enemies for your MP to regenerate a little. As you can see, it is regenerating even though it's draining. It just takes longer. And then you've got your various skills that you can use. As you can see, because I'm in Grit, I can't use Blood Weapon. Blood Weapon is mostly used for off-tanking or non-Grit main tanking. The rest of these skills, though, I can use. So, I'm going to pull this guy. Hey, you! And then I would run behind him. Immobile dummies don't actually turn around, so I can't show that off. But I would use my hate combo to grab hate on him completely. And then, say I need to recover some MP. Well, there's some MP back. And let's just use Soul Leader for the fun of it. And that just gave me back a good chunk of damage or a good chunk of health because of how much damage it did. Let's say I have a whole bunch of enemies on me. I would pop Blood Cut, so that every time one of them hits me, I get more MP. I'd also be using this Shadow Skin, because you should be using cooldowns during pretty much every fight to reduce the damage you take and increase your survivability, which makes it easier for your healer to keep you alive. If this skill is about to run out, and it's still a good while before I'm going to be fighting a boss or something, I might use this as well, because it is a longer cooldown, so it takes longer to recover. Hey look, my MP's starting to get low. I'm gonna use Card instead. That gave me back a good chunk. Let me just use my MP combo, and I'll use Delirium this time, because I'm less concerned with survival and more concerned with dealing damage. One absolutely amusing thing about Dark Knight, it is possible to hold aggro with your non-hate combos purely because you are in Grit and Dark Knight at the same time. I'm just going to stun this guy for some extra damage. Now, there's multiple enemies in this pole. Let's unleash them. Oh, let's see. I'm taking a whole lot of damage this pole. I'm worried about dying. Let's Abyssal Drain for a bunch of health. Look at how much health I just lost. Or MP I just lost. That is expensive. You're not going to be doing that all the time. You're going to be rather sparing with your Dark Arts and your main tanking, because it's a lot harder to keep your MP up as the main tank. Now, these dummies can't actually die, but let's say he would die in the next 15 seconds. See how he didn't actually die, so I didn't get the effect? If I had, it would have given me back a bunch of my MP and HP. Very useful. Oh no, a magic tank buster is on its way. Now I'm safe. I want to parry some more. I also want to take less damage. Oh, this is on cooldown. Extra damage. I don't like any of these guys and how they're looking at me. This is Scourge. This is my damage over time. Bosses, you generally want to keep this up, because it's just helpful. I need to do more damage! I want all of these guys to be slowly melting. I want to be recovering health while I attack. I want to be taking a lot less damage. I want to not die. I want to be healed more. Your cooldowns are used largely at your discretion to assist you in survival and the healer in keeping you alive. Don't be afraid to pop cooldowns if you feel like you need them. Also, don't be afraid to just pop them for the sake of just surviving a little bit more easily. Your defenses can generally keep you alive pretty easily, but they can still be a little more difficult. Now, I'm going to turn off my grit, and I'm going to activate Blood Weapon. And then I'm just going to do big DPS combo for a minute. See how slowly I'm running out of MP because of the Blood Weapon? Now watch as my MP actually starts to plummet while I'm dark siding as an off tank. I'm already at about half MP. If your MP starts running low, stop using your Dark Arts Soul Eater combo and just do what you can to recover MP. Now, I want to really murder this guy, so now, since Blood Weapon converts your physical attacks into MP for you, you could get MP off of a Dark Arts Carbon Spit because of Blood Weapon. So, feel free to do that. There's a raid ride coming. I'm gonna take less damage now. I've got plenty of MP. Back to my Soul Eater Dark Arts. I have Blood Weapon up here. Back to having that active. In the actual heat of battle and tanking, things are going to be pretty varied, but overall, you're going to be using your hate combo here and there, or a whole heck of a lot if you really want to, in order to make sure you have aggro on your main target. If it's a small enough pull and you're not going to be doing a lot of AoE, then I would use Unmend and follow, and then when you're level 54 or higher, plunge in and then use Unleash. If you can't plunge in, then you just run up Unleash as you're running through the enemies to make them all face away from your party. And then I will do my hate combo on the first target, and then I'm generally good to just kind of ignore it if I want to. What I tend to do is I will use the first and second stage of my hate combo on my primary target, and then the third part on the next target in the line. Then I will switch back to the primary target, hit them with this, and then this again, and then the third enemy that is in the kill order will be hit with my Power Slash. I'm just establishing a decent chunk of hate on everything, so that the healer won't rip off of them, and anyone who happens to be AoEing won't rip off of me. Because it's always bad when you lose the aggro of enemies. Let me just clear off those marks. As a result of what tanks have to do, it can be a bit stressful since you do need to be mindful of where your party is, you need to pay attention to the enemy's aggro, you need to avoid AoEs because you don't want to be taking unnecessary damage. If it's an attack you can dodge, you should. Just don't run around like an idiot trying to dodge attacks that you can dodge because you're moving already, because you could get your party members hit by those attacks because you're running around like an idiot. If it's something that comes out in a really quick cast and doesn't have a pre-marked, it doesn't turn to face you while casting attack, just generally take it. If it marks the ground with an attack, or it doesn't like constantly turn to face you when it's going to do the attack, then you can dodge it. If it's something that you're going to get your party hit with, don't. Getting your party hit with attacks is the mark of a horrible tank. Almost as bad as just not being able to hold aggro whatsoever. So, you're going to have to be very mindful of what's going on. There may also be times where things need to be done at certain positions. For that, we have waymarks. You can use these to tell party members where they need to go and stand for something, or where you're going to be tanking something. They can be used in some duties which have multiple parties, 3 parties to be specific, working together. They can be used to mark where each party should be tanking their enemies or positioning themselves. Waymarks can be placed by anyone. Anyone can also mark. The tank is usually going to be the one doing marking, if anyone is, because they're generally the ones deciding the kill order. There are some fights where, as a matter of coordination, players will be marked in order to determine who goes with who for certain mechanics in a fight. But I can't really get into the explanations of that without actually doing those fights, which would take forever. And we've already spent quite a lot of time. But I've covered grabbing enemies, holding their hate, facing them in the right direction. I've covered the fact that your first and most important job is holding an enemy's attention. And to assist in that, you want your tank stance on. Tank stances are important. If your tank doesn't have their tank stance on, and they should have access to it, politely remind them of its existence. Don't be rude. Don't call them an idiot or something. They may have forgotten, because when you're level synced, a lot of things just, well, it knocks literally everything off of you pretty much. So, I'm level 60. Say I were to go into Sasasha, or no, say I were to go into Brayflox's Longstop, which is a level 32 dungeon. You can be up to level 34 in it. I have access to Darkside and Grit, so I can use them in there. But if I have them turned on prior to entering the dungeon, they will be removed because I'm level synced down, which is a bit silly in my opinion, but what are you going to do? So you need to, as a Dark Knight, remember that these skills will be removed from you if you level sync down. So you're going to have to turn them back on, or you're going to have a hard time holding aggro sometimes. And if you're wondering why, take a quick check at your buff bar and see if you have your tank stance on. If you don't, uh-oh. Healers are usually going to be focusing on their attention on the tank, so a polite and helpful healer will remind you if you're already running off to pull enemies and you don't have it turned on. They should notice that you don't have it on and remind you. It's just sort of important to have your tanking stance on because it makes it easier to hold enemy aggression, which is your job. Please remember. Please don't forget. I've demonstrated my skills, as tanks have no skills that specifically affect another party member. Well, most tanks. One of them does, and that's actually going to be in my next video, so we'll cover it then. But in general, tanks don't affect party members with their skills, so there's no skills I can't show off on Dark Knight, because it has no skills that can't just be used. I mean, I couldn't show off Reprisal because I don't get parries off of immobile dummies that never attack. But there's not much I can do about that. Sorry. I believe I've covered everything that needs to be covered. I've shown off the skills. I've given an idea of how their rotations run. It's rather difficult to fully explain. If you do want to play Dark Knight, then there's going to be some experimentation you're going to have to do just to get a feel for how things work. But I'm going to tell you now, if you have established your aggro on an enemy and you're still in Grit, you can hold aggro while using your MP recovery combos pretty easily. Simply because of how much enmity you're generating off of your attacks thanks to Grit, and Darkside removing 15% of Grit's 20% damage penalty. When your tanking stance is turned on and you have Grit on, Dark Knight does the most damage out of the 3 tanks purely as a virtue of having their damage penalty so low. The other tanks do not have anything that specifically can permanently reduce their damage penalty. And Warrior has the highest damage penalty of all at 25%. Which means your attacks have a 5% damage penalty, which is 20% less than theirs. But again, Warriors are designed for dealing damage, so when they're specifically doing what they're built to do, they're probably going to do more damage than you. And by probably, I mean definitely. Warriors can churn out quite a lot of damage. But you're still going to be doing more damage than a Paladin. Pretty much guaranteed no matter what. You're just more powerful than a Paladin. Which does not make Paladin a bad tank. Paladins are a good tank. Rather useful and supportive. Very defensive. Very nice. And they are my second favorite tank in the game. Out of 2. And we'll be covering them in my next video. So until then, I hope I've been informational, educational, helpful, and I hope that my voice doesn't grate on you. Until next time, goodbye.